Hi, I am Lauren, an early stage baby boomer and purveyor of hard truths about my generation. The baby boomers have really fucked up the world. So let's dive into one of many aspects of this fuck up so we can start to fix the problems. Future generations will wholeheartedly thank us. Now, what does asset and income inequality and mounting tensions across segments of society have in common? Let us go back a few years to find out. In fact, let's go back to right after the Second World War. For 30 plus years after that conflict, the workers of the US and the investors in businesses were on the same page. As profits and productivity increased, so did workers' wages. Along with those aligned interests came houses, cars, education, and retirement security for the middle and working classes. But something happened in the 1970s. Actually, many things happened that decade. Nixon took the country off the gold standard. Oil prices quadrupled, not once, but twice, and inflation and interest rates started to soar. You might remember the double-digit interest rates and high inflation, or at least your parents do. What does all this have to do with asset and income inequality and divisive tension across society? It has everything to do with these issues. This was the time in our country's history when something so innocuous showed up on the economic scene, which promised a cure to the country's economic ills, that the vast majority of baby boomers didn't even blink regarding the consequences or understand what was going on. This thing was called neoliberalism. What is it? It is first and foremost an economic agenda, not a political agenda. Don't confuse neoliberalism with its fraternal twin, neoconservatism, nor do not confuse it with liberalism with a capital L, which introduced ideas into the Enlightenment. Neoliberalism slipped into people's minds with the fancy sounding virus phrase supply side economics. Supply side economics, at its core, is all about capital concentration, meaning the more capital that can be concentrated, the more investment that can be made, leading to the country being more productive and wealthier. It sounded great to the uninitiated. The big clue this didn't work for the majority of the people was one of the benefits announced by the pushers of this theory. That benefit was called trickle-down economics, which promised wealth for all and sounds as laughable as it turned out. From the vantage point of today, it is hard to believe that legitimate economists and serious politicians use this term with a straight face. What it means is that when the wealthy do better, people on the bottom of the economic pyramid will do much better with whatever economic benefits trickle down to them, thus justifying the concentration of all that capital in the top echelon of society. Really, what can go wrong? You might be asking yourself, how do you concentrate capital? The answer is, you do it in a very stealth mode, and you do it by taking money from the middle, working, and lower classes and transfer it to the top 10% of society. You do it by dramatically cutting taxes for the rich so they can have more money to invest. Ronald Reagan kicked this off with his big tax cut legislation. Marginal income taxes for the rich were dramatically cut. The tax rate on capital gains was also dramatically cut. Rich people owned most of the assets, and by cutting their capital gains taxes, the thinking was that the cut would free up capital to be reinvested in more productive ventures. You do it by reducing union membership so that more profit flows to the shareholders and management. Unions were attacked on multiple fronts. You can't very well just go in and break up a union. That is too obvious and too risky and could lead to strikes. You do it by passing right-to-work laws, guaranteeing that no person can be compelled as a condition of employment to join a union or to pay dues to a union. States that passed these laws saw manufacturing migrate from northern industrial states to their generally southern states and the pay for the average worker was dramatically less. This didn't break the back of labor unions fast enough for neoliberals, so both political parties championed unfettered globalization of manufacturing and business. Businesses became untethered from their home state, resulting in no loyalty to their workers. Immigration has always been a divisive issue on both sides of the political divide. One thing is clear: businesses do like immigration and believe that a surplus of labor will drive down wages. Now, let me be clear. We are a nation of immigrants, and immigration is a net positive, but the modus operandi for businesses' interest in immigration is more sinister. Well, they couldn't very well be seen championing the importation of cheap labor. So what did they do? The next best thing: transfer their manufacturing facilities to low-cost wage countries such as China. If you can't bring the cheap labor to your factory, bring your factory to the cheap labor. But wait, companies weren't quite done fleecing the middle and working classes. It used to be that you could work for decades and retire on a fixed pension paid for by the company you retired from. This is called a defined benefit retirement plan. The big problem is that when a company promises benefits it can't pay, it has to take current earnings and put that money into the plan. How did they get away with this situation? They invented the defined contribution retirement plan. This is a plan where the employee contributes money and the employer may match a portion with its own contribution. The rub for the employee is that the employer has shifted the risk of having to pay a pension to its retirees onto the employee. If the investments the employee makes don't work out, too bad. Now, this switch is not necessarily all bad, and it does have its positives for employees if done right. But I'll save that discussion for another day. The point is that employers made this switch in order to increase their profits and hence their capital accumulation. Management of these companies were not quite done. After the US government cut taxes for the rich and companies shifted the retirement burden onto the employee, they needed to feather their own nests. How would they do that? Why? Introducing the now ubiquitous employee stock option. This little trick, on the surface, seemingly aligning management's incentives with shareholders, would prove to be one of the major ways a person can become rich in this country. I won't go into details right now on how management learned how to abuse this compensation benefit. I will save that for another discussion regarding our exploding debt burden. Yes, stock options played a part. The result of these changes to the employer-employee contract, in combination with the dramatic tax reductions for the rich, was that worker wages stagnated from the mid-1970s through today, while the wages of top earners, who are also the owners of assets and capital, have skyrocketed. With its reduced wages, the middle class started to see its standard of living decrease, resulting in the increase of two-earner households to just keep their standard of living flat, and increases in their personal debt. People went into massive debt to buy a house. They went into massive debt to get an education. They went into debt to buy a car. In fact, cars have become so expensive relative to incomes that typical car loans had a 3-year term. It is not uncommon for a car loan to have a 7-year term with $1,000 monthly payments. As you can imagine, all these economic dislocations and increases in inequality have caused our politics to reflect these changes. The resulting turmoil has the current Democratic Party trying to piecemeal repairing the damage done over the last 50 years, and the Republican Party trying to figure out how to create a coherent economic plan other than just cut taxes and kick the can down the road. Both parties' policies have contributed to a topic we will return to, which is our slow-moving debt crisis, which threatens to overwhelm any policy shifts going forward. Thank you for listening.